My pool exploded. Not literally, but that's what it felt like when I saw the surface of my once clear oasis coated in thick, black, greasy sludge that shimmered under the morning sun like a death sentence. My neighbors stood frozen, their kids clutching pool noodles like useless plastic swords. A dog howled dramatically in the distance, and even the local birds chose violence, squawking in disgust from the rooftops. I blinked, hoping I was hallucinating from late-night nachos. But no, my pool had been sabotaged. And while everyone stared at the mess, I knew exactly who did it. Karen Lamb, HOA president, part-time suburban overlord, and full-time destroyer of joy. She smiled at me from across the cul-de-sac like the Joker in pastel yoga pants. It wasn't always like this. When I moved into Whispering Oaks, I had dreams of peace, barbecues, and pool parties. After years of renting and dealing with landlords who thought central air was a window fan and a prayer, I finally bought a house. A nice one with enough backyard space for a pool, the ultimate suburban fleck. The HOA wasn't ideal, but I figured, how bad could it be? I signed the forms, paid the dues, and tried not to laugh at the 36-page rulebook that banned things like overly enthusiastic wind chimes and plants that looked judgmental. I should have known then. Karen introduced herself with a clipboard and a head tilt that screamed superiority. She didn't ask if I had questions. She asked if I had read all the guidelines, especially the sections on backyard modifications, communal harmony, and decorative cohesion. I smiled, nodded, and made a mental note to keep my lawn mowed with military precision. What I didn't realize was that Karen had beef with pools. Not because of noise or safety or the usual complaints. No, it was personal. Rumor had it she tried to get one installed years ago, but the old HOA board had rejected her plan for being aesthetic chaos. Since then, she treated every splash in Whispering Oaks like a personal insult. So when my pool got approved by a narrow vote, she clearly wasn't happy about it. I knew I was on her radar. The passive-aggressive emails started. First, just a reminder that blue pool umbrellas must be navy, not cobalt. Then came the fines, such as one stating my pool filter was audible from 17 feet away at 8 a.m. I laughed at first, then I cried. Then I bought headphones and learned to meditate with whale sounds. But the final straw, the real boiling point, was the pool party. My housewarming bash, celebrating finally having a pool. I sent out fun invites, bought 2 mini burgers, hired a DJ named Sir Splash-A-Lot, don't ask, and even rented a giant inflatable flamingo named Destiny. I didn't invite Karen, obviously, but someone forwarded her the invite anyway. She showed up mid-party with a cold casserole and a fake smile so tight it could have cut glass. She wandered around silently for 10 minutes, sniffed the air like she was checking for unauthorized fun, and left without a word. Except, she did say one thing to me as she passed by the pool, staring into it like it owed her money. Enjoy it while you can. The next morning, I understood what she meant. I woke up to screaming. It wasn't human screaming, but the kind of chaos that can only come from a mix of children, adults, and chlorinated panic. I ran outside barefoot, instantly regretting it, as I stepped on what felt like a melted Hot Wheels car. And there it was, my pool, the pride of my yard, transformed into an oil pit. The water was pitch black, glistening and bubbling ominously. The surface had a rainbow sheen that would have been pretty if it wasn't, toxic. People backed away slowly. One kid cried because his floating turtle was dying. Destiny the flamingo had capsized. The DJ was speechless, an impressive feat for a man who once freestyled about meatloaf for 7 minutes. The smell was unreal. It hit you in the chest and lungs, like a mechanic's garage had exploded in your nostrils. I stared, stunned, and in that moment of surreal horror, something caught my eye. A glove floating near the skimmer basket. Not just any glove, a gardening glove with the initials KL stitched neatly in one corner. Karen Lamb, HOA queen, gardening enthusiast, known for pruning her hedges at 6 a.m. in leopard print slippers. I picked up the glove with pool tongs, holding it like a bomb. Neighbors began to whisper. Someone took a picture. Someone else suggested calling the EPA. I felt like I was starring in a suburban version of CSI, except instead of crime scenes, we had garden gnomes and picket fences. My blood boiled. This wasn't a prank. This was chemical warfare. Poolmageddon. And the culprit had left her calling card like a cartoon villain. But here's the twist. I thought reporting it would be simple. Call the HOA, show the evidence, justice served. But the HOA wasn't interested in justice. Not when it involved Karen. They smiled politely, said they'd investigate, and then fine me for suspicious fluid discharge on community property. Karen, meanwhile, acted shocked and concerned. Who would do such a thing? She said, sipping from her personalized HOA royalty mug. She even offered to send over a pool cleaning brochure, as if I didn't want to launch her into space with a pool net. That night, I sat on my porch, defeated, smelling like engine grease and broken dreams. My cousin Leo, a tech nerd with questionable morals and 3 VPNs, sat next to me. He watched the footage from my barely functioning backyard security cam and froze. Dude, look at this. He zoomed in on a shadowy figure climbing over my fence at 2:43 a.m. The person was small, wore a hoodie, and carried what looked like a giant jug. The video quality was potato grade, but one thing was clear. They walked away without the jug. I stood up. That's her. That's Karen. Leo paused. Are you sure? I didn't blink. Who else do you know who vandalizes with engine oil and wears orthopedic shoes? I didn't care that I sounded paranoid. I didn't care that the HOA was useless. Karen had declared war, and I was done playing defense. Because now I had something better than revenge. I had proof, I had motive, and, unknown to both of us at the time, we were about to have the FBI. The morning after the oil disaster, my yard smelled like a truck stop at rush hour. I hadn't slept. Every creak of the fence or flap of a bird's wing jolted me upright, like I was living in a thriller directed by someone with a grudge against pools. I kept replaying the security footage Leo pulled, over and over. The shadowy figure in the hoodie, the jug, the suspicious limp. Everything pointed to Karen, but the resolution was so bad it could have been Bigfoot, and we'd still be guessing. That didn't matter to me. I knew it was her. I could feel it in my chlorine-scented soul. She had finally snapped, and now she was playing the victim like it was a Broadway show. I needed real evidence, the kind no clipboard could wiggle out of. Leo suggested we go full CSI, suburbia. He brought over his gear, portable cameras, motion sensors, a drone that looked like it was built with spare parts from a Roomba, and a box labeled Operation Karen. He said that without a court-admissible visual of Karen near the pool, it was my word versus hers, and in this neighborhood, her word was gospel. So we rigged my backyard with enough surveillance to make a conspiracy theorist blush. Cameras hidden in the birdhouses, a motion sensor in the inflatable flamingo's eye socket, and a baby monitor in the fake rock by the garden gnome. I was officially being creepy, but for justice. Meanwhile, Karen continued her reign of pastel terror. She started walking her dog, Muffin, suspiciously close to my property line. Muffin, a tiny white puffball with the soul of a demon, made a habit of relieving herself right next to my mailbox. Karen would stare at me while it happened, as if daring me to complain. I did once. She smiled and said, "It's a free country," before walking off humming the national anthem. That same day, I received an HOA citation for mailbox posture issues. I didn't even know that was a thing. To make matters weirder, I noticed a white van parked on the corner every evening. It had the words "Chili Treats" painted in a font that looked like it hadn't seen joy since the Clinton era. No kids ever approached it. No music played. I walked past it once and caught a glimpse through the tinted window. Inside was a bank of monitors and a man who looked like he was allergic to daylight. Leo and I ran the plates through a sketchy website he had bookmarked. The van was registered to WCS, Whispering Oaks Community Security, Whispering Oaks Homeowners Association. Karen had surveillance on the entire neighborhood, and she disguised it as an ice cream truck. We decided to get inside that van. Leo dressed up as a delivery guy and distracted the van operator with a fake package from Parcel Dude. While the guy was arguing about signing for a box of yoga bricks, I slipped in through the side door. Inside was a low-budget bat cave, feeds from different houses, motion logs, audio recordings. Karen was watching everything, but what chilled me to the bone was the folder on the desktop labeled Pool Gate. Inside were time-stamped images of my house, zoomed-in stills of my backyard, my guests, even Destiny the inflatable flamingo. She had been planning this. She had documented it like a trophy hunter. I quickly downloaded the folder onto Leo's flash drive and got out before the guy finished his rant about package insurance. Back at my place, we pored over the files. One image stood out, a night vision photo taken from the woods behind my fence. The timestamp matched the time of the oil dumping. The figure was clearer in this shot, short, stocky, wearing slippers. I zoomed in until the pixels nearly broke. There it was, the same gardening gloves from the skimmer. One hand held the jug. The other had the faint reflection of a bracelet. Karen's bracelet. The same one she wore to every HOA meet. Gold chain. Little charm that said, HOA for EVR. You couldn't make this stuff up. Still, it wasn't enough. If I accused her now, she'd deny it, spin the story, maybe even say I doctored the images. I needed more, so I decided to play her game. The next day, I hosted a pool memorial barbecue, a satire-filled cookout to honor the death of my pool. I invited everyone, including Karen. I set up posters with dramatic captions like RIP Clean Water and Justice for Destiny. I gave an emotional speech. People laughed. Karen did not. She stood by the punch bowl, face frozen in a tight-lipped grimace, watching as I handed out souvenir oil-slick pool noodles. It was theater, and she hated it. Mid-barbecue, Karen approached me. She handed over a casserole dish covered in foil and said, "Peace offering." I took it like it was radioactive. The label said, "Tuna surprise," but I suspected the surprise was food poisoning. When she walked away, Leo and I popped it open carefully. Inside was a lumpy, fishy mess that smelled like regret. But what mattered was what we found under the foil, a smear of black goo. It looked like oil, smelled like oil. Leo sampled it with a testing strip from his science kit. It turned bright purple. "Yep," he said. "Same chemical signature as the pool sludge." I took the dish straight to the HOA board meeting that evening. I arrived dramatically late, carrying the casserole like it was Exhibit A in a courtroom. I stood in front of the board and laid out my case. The footage, the glove, the surveillance, and the casserole of doom. Karen sat calmly, arms crossed, legs swinging like she was bored of this entire universe. I could see her working through her options: deny, deflect, destroy. She did all three. "This is a ridiculous conspiracy," she said with perfect poise. "Anyone could have planted those images, and I can't be blamed for how a casserole reacts to odd taste buds." She even laughed. I just wanted to end the tension. The board nodded. One of them said something about not jumping to conclusions. Another mumbled, "Tensions are high." I was about to scream when the door burst open. A man in a suit and tie strode in, holding a folder marked Federal Environmental Division. He looked around the room and said, "I need to speak with a Mike Jensen." I raised my hand slowly. He walked up to me, flipped open the folder, and said, "The substance found in your pool matches a restricted type of synthetic motor oil tied to a federal investigation. We're looking at felony-level environmental damage. We believe it was dumped intentionally, and we're going to need to look into your homeowners association." He paused, looked at Karen, and added, "All of it." You could have heard a gnat cough in that room. Karen's foot stopped swinging. Her eyes narrowed. I stared at the agent, mind spinning. This was bigger than HOA revenge. This was federal. And Karen, she had just stepped in it. The silence that followed the FBI agent's announcement was deafening. For the first time since I moved into Whispering Oaks, Karen didn't have a comeback, a snarky quip, or a passive-aggressive rule citation to throw in my face. She just sat there, blinking, her lips twitching as if trying to reboot a failed operating system. I half expected her to start gaslighting the federal agent. Instead, she did what every petty HOA tyrant would do when faced with someone she couldn't outvote. She smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile you'd see from a cat just before it knocks your favorite mug off the counter. Agent Ramirez introduced himself officially, asked to speak with both Karen and me privately, and requested copies of all HOA surveillance footage, emails, and incident reports. Karen tried to deflect. "I don't know what sort of confusion this is, but our HOA runs on the principle of community order and shared values. We're practically a national model." Ramirez stared at her with the kind of look usually reserved for malfunctioning robots. "Ma'am, this isn't about your community potluck. The oil in Mr. Jensen's pool matches a batch tied to illegal dumping operations traced to a black market disposal ring. This is about environmental crimes and obstruction." Karen's smile twitched again. Back at my place, Ramirez sat across from me at my dining table, flipping through a folder thicker than the HOA's bylaws. "Let me break this down for you, Mr. Jensen," he said. "The oil we found in your pool isn't something anyone can buy at a corner gas station. It's industrial-grade synthetic, toxic, and was supposed to be incinerated under federal regulation. Whoever dumped it in your yard committed a federal crime. And worse, since it was disposed of on private property, you could be liable unless we prove sabotage." My heart dropped. "Wait, so I could get fined?" Ramirez nodded. "Fined, yes. Potentially charged if we don't establish intent. That's why we need everything. Security footage, communications, any link between you and whoever dumped that oil. So far, your story holds up, but we need more than suspicion. I showed him everything. Leo's hacked files, the footage of the shadowy figure, the casserole with the purple glowing goo. Ramirez watched carefully, never interrupting. When the operation_pull_mp4 video popped up in the HOA's internal files, he raised an eyebrow. It was grainy and barely a minute long, but it showed Karen sneaking through the bushes with a jug, whispering, "Let's see how he enjoys his little oasis now." She even giggled, a full villainous giggle. Ramirez smirked. She actually named the file that? Wow. Arrogance and stupidity, a dangerous combination. The investigation began moving faster. Karen's name was flagged in an EPA incident from 2 years earlier involving a landscaping firm she part-owned. Turns out, her nephew ran a business that collected used motor oil from auto shops, but failed to properly dispose of it. Instead, they stockpiled it in unlicensed warehouses, then donated barrels to people who didn't ask too many questions. It was shady, illegal, and typical Karen. According to records, several barrels had gone missing a month prior to my pool incident. When pressed, Karen claimed she knew nothing. "I haven't spoken to my nephew in years," she insisted. But digital communications said otherwise. Emails, payment receipts, and even a group chat where she sent him a message. "Need a favor? Something messy?" Winky face. As more layers unraveled, it became clear the HOA wasn't just a nosy neighborhood committee. Under Karen's rule, it was a fortress of manipulation. She used fines and policies to control dissenters, redirected funds toward community beautification projects that suspiciously involved her family's companies, and blackmailed homeowners into compliance. People had been afraid to challenge her, until now. With federal investigators poking around, HOA board members began cracking. One by one, they called me, apologized, said they had seen things, suspected things, but didn't want to be targeted. One board member, Mark, even admitted Karen made him sign blank citation forms she later filled in at her leisure. "She once fined a guy for having a festive garden gnome," he said. Festive, that was the crime. Ramirez organized a neighborhood meeting, not an HOA one, but a federal briefing. It was surreal. Neighbors gathered in lawn chairs on my driveway as the agent detailed what had been uncovered. Illegal oil disposal, HOA fund misuse, surveillance overreach, possible identity fraud tied to Karen's nephew. As he spoke, faces turned from confused to furious. Ramirez ended with a warning. "Anyone still aiding in obstruction will be treated accordingly. If you've been threatened, coerced, or used by this association's leadership, now's your chance to come forward." Karen didn't show up. Instead, she posted a statement in the HOA newsletter claiming she was being unfairly targeted for her commitment to community excellence. She compared herself to Joan of Arc. That same day, she emailed another HOA fine to me for lawn clippings visible beyond property boundary. It was her way of saying, "I'm not done." But I was. And I had an idea. With the board shaken and the neighborhood finally angry enough to revolt, I called for an emergency vote to remove Karen as president. According to the bylaws, ironically written by Karen herself, if over 60% of homeowners signed a recall petition, she could be ousted. I got 73% by sunset. The emergency meeting was awkward. Karen showed up in a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses, as if hiding from the paparazzi. She sat at the front like she still ran the show. When I stood up to speak, she cut me off. "This is a farce," she said. "You're trying to destroy the fabric of our community." I didn't yell. I didn't mock. I simply played the pool doom video on a projector screen. There she was, hood up, jug in hand, whispering her villain monologue like she'd practiced it. The silence was absolute. The vote was swift and brutal, unanimous. Even the board members she thought were loyal raised their hands. She looked around, stunned, as if the neighborhood had betrayed her. She stood slowly, glanced at me, and said in a calm, cold voice, "You think this is over? You have no idea what you've started." Then she turned, heels clicking across the pavement, and walked out like a deposed dictator. It should have felt like victory, but something in her tone stuck with me. That wasn't the end, not even close. Karen might have lost her crown, but she wasn't done swinging. And as I'd soon learn, she had one more trick up her sleeve, one that would flip the entire situation and drag me down with her. The video spread faster than gossip at a neighborhood barbecue. Within hours of uploading operation_pull_mp4 to a burner YouTube channel Leo set up, it racked up tens of thousands of views. People couldn't get enough of watching Karen sneak through bushes like a dollar store ninja and dump oil into my pool while narrating her sabotage like she was auditioning for a villain monologue competition. By the next morning, it was everywhere: Twitter, TikTok, Facebook groups with names like HOA Horror Stories and Suburban Drama Unleashed. People added dramatic music to the video, slow-motion effects, even animated versions of Destiny, the flamingo weeping in the background. It became a meme, a movement, and a message all at once. And with that, everything changed. Karen tried to contain the fallout, but it was like trying to put out a house fire with a salad fork. Her job at the real estate agency dropped her faster than a hot pan. Turns out, being the face of a viral environmental crime isn't great for business. The agency released a statement about moral responsibility and ongoing investigations, which was PR code for "she's toast." The fallout didn't stop there. News vans parked outside Whispering Oaks, interviewing anyone who would talk. A reporter tried to ask me if Destiny the flamingo was okay. I told her we were taking things one day at a time. The HOA imploded like a cheap inflatable bounce house. With Karen gone and the board turning on itself, people started digging. Leo and I, now considered local heroes by half the neighborhood and minor celebrities by the other half, were sent a flood of documents anonymously: emails, financial records, secret meeting minutes. Karen had been embezzling HOA funds for years, funneling money into shell landscaping companies owned by her cousin, overcharging residents for trumped-up infractions, and even billing the association for spa visits she labeled as stress reduction maintenance. It was a full-blown scandal, and the residents were done being quiet about it. That's when the FBI returned, not for me this time, but to seize HOA financial records. Karen had somehow used her position to manipulate local contracts and kickbacks tied to community development projects. Ramirez gave me a call, mostly to thank me and Leo for helping crack open what turned out to be a much bigger operation than he originally suspected. "You didn't just solve a pool crime," he told me. "You took down an HOA mafia." He said it half joking, but the truth behind it was sobering. What started as a petty feud had uncovered years of manipulation, fraud, and corruption, all hidden behind the perfectly trimmed hedges and pastel houses of our little suburban utopia. Karen, of course, didn't go quietly. She filed a defamation lawsuit against me, claiming emotional damage and loss of reputation due to the malicious spread of altered video content. Her lawyer tried to argue that the footage could have been AI-generated. The judge looked at the video, then at Karen, then at her lawyer like he was auditioning for a comedy sketch, and dismissed the claim with a sigh. That's when I countersued for property damage, emotional distress, lost income from pool repairs, and yes, for traumatizing Destiny the flamingo, which, while not legally sound, made the court chuckle. The ruling came in swiftly. Karen was ordered to pay me $25,000 in damages plus legal fees. It was poetic, really. She'd spent years fining people into silence, and now she had to sell her house to pay the very neighbor she tried to destroy. The community was left in a strange but beautiful state of transition. Without Karen's iron grip, we held a public forum to decide the future of the HOA. It was voted unanimously to dissolve the original structure and rebuild from scratch, this time with transparency, rotating leadership, and no lifetime power seat. The HOA would be managed like a real community, not a personal fiefdom. I was offered the first chair position, which I accepted on one condition: that we rewrite the rules to prevent anyone named Karen from ever holding executive power again. It was petty, sure, but the crowd erupted with laughter and applause. Even Ramirez, who had stayed behind as an observer, gave me a slow clap. Rebuilding the pool took time, money, and a small army of contractors who treated oil removal like it was radioactive waste. But I didn't just restore it, I upgraded it. The new pool had a saltwater system, LED lights that changed color at night, and a custom mural of Destiny, the flamingo wearing sunglasses and rising like a phoenix from the water. It wasn't just a pool anymore. It was a monument, a victory lap, a middle finger made of tile and chlorine. We threw the grand reopening party 2 months later. It was legendary. Half the town showed up, including people from outside Whispering Oaks who had followed the saga online. Leo made t-shirts with Destiny's face on them and sold them at a stand near the hot dog grill. A local DJ blasted remixes of Karen's oil-dumping audio over clubby beats. Even Ramirez attended, dressed in flip-flops and a Hawaiian shirt, sipping from a coconut cup while pretending not to be a federal agent. It was everything I had hoped the first party would be, but with 1,000 times more satisfaction. As the sun dipped below the roofs of the neighborhood and the pool glowed in soft purple light, I stood at the edge holding a drink, watching kids splash, adults laugh, and destiny float proudly in her resurrection form. A few neighbors clinked glasses with me. One of them, a man who had lived here longer than anyone, patted me on the back and said, "You saved this place, you know. And you did it without becoming like her." That stuck with me. Because in all the madness, all the courtrooms and conspiracy boards and federal investigations, I'd been tempted to play her game, to out-petty the petty queen. But in the end, it wasn't revenge that brought justice. It was exposure. It was truth. It was the power of a flamingo-themed pool float and a community that finally found its voice. I looked around one last time, soaking in the sound of unfiltered joy. The pool shimmered. Destiny winked. Leo passed me another drink and asked, "So, what's next?" I thought about it for a moment, smiled, and said, "Honestly, I'm just going to enjoy the water. No drama, no surveillance vans, no secret oil plots." He raised his glass. "To freedom." I nodded. "To freedom, chlorine, and the end of tyrants in tracksuits." And with that, I dove in. Just when I thought it was over, just when I believed that Karen had finally been exorcised from the soul of this neighborhood like some HOA demon banished by federal paperwork and public humiliation, she came back swinging with a vengeance that could only be described as suburban warfare 2.0. It started with a noise complaint. An anonymous tip submitted to the city claiming that my pool's new saltwater pump exceeded permissible decibel levels by 0.6 dB at precisely 3:14 a.m. on Tuesdays. The city inspector looked embarrassed as he stood in my yard with a decibel meter, shrugging and mumbling about protocols. That same week, I found a fine for a mailbox violation taped to my door. Apparently, my box was tilted 3 degrees west due to irregular soil swelling, whatever that meant. And then came the graffiti. 3 nights in a row, someone spray-painted HOA for life in neon pink on my driveway, my fence, and once, disturbingly, on Destiny's inflatable wing. First, I laughed. Really, I did. It was so over the top, so cartoonishly bitter that it almost felt like satire. But then Leo showed me the security footage. It was grainy, distorted, probably tampered with, but the figure in the video was wearing the same leopard print slippers I had seen Karen wore every morning while pruning her roses. And just like that, I realized this wasn't over. Karen hadn't disappeared. She had gone underground, figuratively, like a mole, a very angry, very HOA-obsessed mole with a grudge and spray paint. Agent Ramirez returned to town, not because of the graffiti, but because someone had been leaking false reports to a government environmental agency, claiming my rebuilt pool was using unregulated chemicals. He showed up at my door with a look of exhausted disbelief and said, "She's still going." I didn't even have to ask who. Apparently, Karen had filed a report under a fake name, Carla Frame. Really subtle. Unfortunately for her, she wasn't very good at masking IP addresses or using fake burner phones. Ramirez rolled his eyes and added her to the growing pile of active violations and pending charges she was racking up like it was a game of HOA Grand Theft Auto. But she had one last grenade left to throw. One morning, I got a letter, official-looking envelope, all caps return address. It was from the Federal Environmental Protection Bureau. Inside was a notice. I was being fined $155,000 for hazardous chemical storage and improper disposal. Because the oil had been dumped on my property, because technically, and I mean legally technically, I was the landowner where the crime occurred. Unless I could definitively prove I wasn't involved, I was still liable for cleanup under the Toxic Substances Disposal Act. I reread the letter 3 times. It didn't matter that I'd been the victim. It didn't matter that the FBI had arrested the actual sabotage perpetrator. I was still on the hook. Karen knew this law. She had weaponized it against me. This wasn't just revenge. It was a setup from the beginning. For a while, I felt defeated. The money I had gotten from the civil suit against her would now vanish into government fines and environmental repair costs. The new pool I was so proud of suddenly felt like a gilded cage. The neighbors, despite their support, had moved on. The online buzz had faded. Destiny the flamingo, once the symbol of suburban revolution, floated half-deflated in the corner like a forgotten hero. And Karen, wherever she was hiding, was probably sipping her tea and watching it all unfold with smug satisfaction. But Leo wasn't ready to give up. He went full digital bloodhound, dug into her digital footprint, searched through cloud backups, decrypted old emails she thought she deleted. And then, like a gift from the algorithm gods, he found it. A folder titled Backups_Pool_2025. Inside, dozens of photos. Karen posing next to oil barrels. Karen labeling the jugs with her nephew. Karen writing the words, "Pool surprise," on a clipboard while making duck lips at the camera. It was like she was documenting her crime spree for a Netflix series. There was even a selfie with the oil-dumping jug and the caption, "Revenge is best served slick." We packaged everything, sent it to Ramirez. He practically flew to the local office with the folder. The charges against me were dropped within 48 hours. The EPA even issued an apology letter, although it was written in the kind of vague bureaucratic language that makes you wonder if they're sorry or just annoyed they got caught doing something wrong. Karen, meanwhile, was hit with an additional federal charge for falsifying environmental reports, and it finally stuck. There were no more loopholes left, no more HOA policies to manipulate, no more anonymous tips. She was fined $40,000, issued a cease and desist order, and barred from holding any community leadership position within the state for 5 years. With the dust finally, truly settled, the neighborhood came together to host a celebration. We called it Freedom Fest. No HOA, no fines, no casserole diplomacy, just real people, real fun, and a fully repaired, sparkling clean pool that no longer smelled like a tire fire. We had games, food trucks, and a Destiny inflatable redesign, this time with golden wings and a crown. People wore t-shirts that read, "I survived the HOA apocalypse," and "Let Des reign." Ramirez came in flip-flops again. Even the mayor showed up for 10 minutes and took a selfie with Destiny. It was surreal. As the night wore on and the lights around the pool glowed soft blues and purples, I stood on the patio, drink in hand, watching the community actually be a community. No politics, no citations, just people laughing and kids cannonballing into freedom. Leo joined me, holding a plate of nachos and grinning like he had just won a hacker lottery. "We did it," he said, mouthful. "You turned your pool into a rebellion." I smiled, but I wasn't thinking about the past. I was thinking about the future, because this wasn't just about me, or a pool, or even Karen. It was about standing up when no one else would, about fighting back against tyranny in any form, even if that tyranny wears a visor and tracks neighborhood lawn height. I thought about everyone who had thanked me, the people who said they wished they had spoken up sooner, and the neighbors who now walked by my house and gave me a thumbs up instead of filing a noise complaint. I raised my glass toward Destiny, floating majestically under the moonlight. "To peace, to persistence," I said quietly, "and to never letting another Karen rise again." And then, as if on cue, Destiny let out a faint squeak from her inflatable beak and spun in a perfect circle. That was all the confirmation I needed.